welcome. My name is Michael Alfano. I'm the Instructional Technology Coach for the Peekskill City School District, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to create a data dashboard in Google Sheets. So we're going to be using this data dashboards file here, which should be found in the video description if you'd like to make a copy and follow along. There are 3 tabs in this document. The first is a task list that I'm going to be going through just to keep myself on track. There is a data tab here, which I'm going to go over briefly, which is all sample data, fake student names, IDs, data, etc., and an exemplar dashboard, which is what we're going to build by the end of this video. So there's going to be some pivot tables, charts, filter view links, slicers, and some great features here that we're going to go over. So first, we're going to quickly just review the data that we do have, and then we're going to jump right into actually building the dashboard. So column A is a list of unique student ID numbers, recommended in most cases so that you can make sure your data is aligned. You have last name, first name, school, again, all made up data. Group is a generic group here. If you want to think of this like an ethnicity, you can. If you want to think of it like maybe groups, clubs, houses, whatever it might be in a school setting. We just went generic with group here. Grade column. The next 4 columns here all are some type of status. So you have either honor roll, high honor roll, or NA, meaning they don't have that status. Same thing for English language learner, students with disabilities, and after school, meaning if the student's in an after school program. It might be helpful to look at your data and compare whether the after school program helps students succeed or not, or anything like that. Column K, you have the number of behavior referrals. It's up to you whether you want to think of these as positive or negative. We have attendance percentages, so this would be the percentage that the student is present in school, so 93% of the time they're in school, and then the reverse of that, this is 7% they're absent from school. Moving over, the next 8 columns are all pretty similar. There's basically 2 groups of 4 here. So we have ELA beginning, middle, and end of year scores, along with the average of those 3 scores for each student. The next 4, exact same thing, but for math. And then there is an overall average, which is calculated. In this case, I believe it's just the ELA average and the math average combined together as an overall average. So that's the sample data we're working with, and a quick look at the data dashboard before we get to building it. We have just a nice header here just for aesthetics. We have a pivot table about the ELA scores for each school and an accompanying chart. Same exact thing for math, same pivot table and chart. Next, we're looking at the honor roll status of students and their average attendance rates for each of those 3 categories. Last pivot table and chart here is the groups of students over on the left, their honor roll status across the top, and then whether they are after school students in the middle. That's going to be created into a stacked bar chart with some data labels. And we're going to end with some frequent views here. We're using linked filter views. And at the very top, we're going to take a look at implementing slicers and just a quick tip on how to view the underlying data in a pivot table. So with all of that intro, we are ready to get started. To start off, we are going to create a pivot table for the beginning, middle, and end of year ELA scores by school. So to do that, we're going to start in the Data tab. I'm going to click in this upper left corner to select everything. And then I'm going to go to Insert, Pivot Table, make sure my data range looks good, and I'll put this on a new sheet. From here, I have a pivot table on a new tab. I'm going to type dashboard and just give that a title. And we're about ready to get started. So for the pivot table, if you've never used one, What we're basically looking at here is a blank table that will update automatically based on what you do in the pivot table editor, which is on the right side. On the far right, we have all of our column headers from the source data, and then we have rows, columns, values, and filters, all of which we will get into as we build them. So you'll see rows shows this light gray on the left. If we put a metric into rows, if I drag and drop, you'll see that each school takes up one row. Sometimes people think this is, well, they're in a column, but it's really, those are categories for each of these columns, each of these rows, excuse me, which is why that is put into rows. So we're going to put school into rows. If we were to put it into columns, if I move this over to columns, you'll see every school name is the header of a column. So that's the difference between rows and columns there. And we're going to get into values and filters a little bit later. So next we're going to look at the ELA beginning, middle, and end of year scores. You might think that you want to put ELA beginning of year into columns. What that will do again is every score, every unique score that's in your data set will be the header of a column. So this would essentially be all the Evergreen Heights students that got a 62 and then something about them within. So we don't want them in columns. We actually want to put this into values. The values are this middle area of the table, and in this case, values are going to aggregate or combine all of the relevant data in some way. So right now, let's wrap this heading real quick. What this is showing us is for all of Evergreen Heights, we're taking the ELA beginning of year score, and by default, we're actually summing or adding them all up, which is not what we want in this case. So we're going to change the summarize by from sum to average. I'm going to quickly highlight these and reduce those decimal points since we don't need them. And now this is telling us for Evergreen Heights, the average score for the ELA beginning of year test is an 84. For Grove Prep, it's also an 84. Hilltop, it's a 79, and so on. Now we can repeat that process for middle and end of year. So we're going to grab the middle of year. I'm going to drag it below the ELA beginning of year. If you drag it on top of, that'll turn green. It'll actually replace that, which we don't want to do. We want to put it underneath and create a new set of values. Again, the default is sum to add them up. We want to change that to average. And I'm going to put end of year right below it, change sum to average, and I'm going to highlight all of this, get rid of those decimal points, and I'm going to wrap those headers again just so we could read it a little easier. So now we have our pivot table. This will update automatically if the data in this tab changes, and we are now good to go with the table. If we want the grand total or not, we can check or uncheck this show totals here. For now, I'm just going to leave it. So the overall average beginning of year score was 84, then 83, then 82. In a true setting, again, this is made up data. We wouldn't want to see this trending downward. We'd hopefully want to see that trending upward. So next, I'm going to close the pivot table editor by clicking this X. If I ever need it again, I can just click on a cell in the pivot table and then click on edit over here. To chart this now, because again, we had the pivot table and the accompanying chart, we're going to highlight the headers along with the data. I'm going to exclude the grand total, and I'm going to either click on the chart icon here, or I can click on insert chart. Same button, just in two different places. Now I get my chart. I get the chart editor, which I'm going to close for the moment, and I'm going to just click on it, widen it a little bit so that we can see those school names, and I'm going to just slide this over to the right. So now my chart is done. If I highlight on or hover on any of these bars, I will see the values. I'm not going to add data labels onto these just because it'll get messy. We'll do that for a few others in this group. The only two things I'm going to do here, if we go back to the task list, we created that pivot table, we charted the data. We're going to update the y-axis just so that it's a little easier to see. Most of these schools, or not any of them, are anywhere below 50 as a score. So to see the real nuanced differences, I'm going to click on the three dots, edit chart, go to customize, and I'm going to look at the vertical axis, which is over here on the left side. I want the minimum here to be 55, the maximum to be 100, and I'm going to click away. This is the exact same data. We've just adjusted the y-axis so we can see more of these nuanced differences. We're zooming in on the 55 to 100 range. So that's it for the first chart, and we've made our first pivot table and chart for our dashboard. The next thing we're going to do is do the same exact thing for math. So an easier way, since we're going to be building all of this based on one data set, this pivot table here is already linked to the exact data set we want. So I can either copy the entire table or even just the top left cell. I'm just doing a Control or Command C. And if I paste that down below, the entire pivot table will get pasted again for us. So clicking in here, I can click on the Edit button, and you'll see the exact same set of rows and values that we did before. Rather than build this from scratch, you can clear all up here, which you could do for some practice. I'm actually going to use this as a bit of a shell or a model, and it'll help me to build my next one. So we do want the schools still in our rows over here. We're just going to update these three column headers, which again I'll wrap, to be math beginning, middle, and end of year. So to do that, I'm going to take math beginning of year, and I'm actually going to drag it on top of ELA beginning of year. We'll see that it turns green, and when we let go, it will replace the ELA with the math, which is nice so I can see what I've done and what I still need to change. And always be sure we don't want the sum in this case, we want the average. So middle of year on top of math, on top of ELA middle of year, change it to average. Same with end of year on top of, change it to average. And just like last time, we're going to get rid of all those decimals. So in a few seconds, we now have our exact same pivot table, but for math scores. I'm going to highlight the headers and the data. Again, I'm going to leave off the grand total for now. Click on the Insert Chart button. And while it's open, I'm just going to customize vertical axis, and we're going to do that from 55 to 100. Close that out. I'm going to expand that out a little bit and move it right over to the right side. So now we have two of these. Again, our exemplar dashboard had the ELA and the math assessment data here. You'll notice the titles look a little cleaner in the exemplar. So to update those the easier way, we're just going to double click on that title. Brings us right to where we can change that in the settings. I can type up here or in the side, it's the same thing. I'm just going to put ELA data, and down for math, again, double click, math data, and now we have some nice clean titles for us for our charts. Next, we're going to do another pivot table. So again, top left cell, I'm going to copy, move down just a little bit, and paste, and then click on the edit button here. Since we're building a brand new pivot table, I am actually going to use the clear all button and wipe this pivot table out so we can start from scratch. So we copied and pasted, we updated the values to math, changed it to average, charted it, changed the y-axis, and we're up to step 9 now. So now we're going to make a pivot table for honor roll status and the average attendance. So we are going to take a look at what that looked like here. Honor roll status is going to be in the rows, and then this is going to be a values for, because we're aggregating here, of the attendance rate. So in this case, just to show you a different way, next to rows, I can click on Add and see a drop down. And I can also type in here to make this a little easier. So pick on honor roll status for our rows. And then we wanted attendance percent that they are present as our values, not columns, but values. And we want to, again, summarize that by the average. Let's go ahead and wrap that header, and we will get rid of all of the extra decimals once again. So pivot table is created. I'm going to close the editor just for a little more room, highlight my headers and my data, click on chart, and in just a few seconds, I have my chart for my honor roll status across the bottom, and we have the attendance rates going up the y-axis. If I wanted to, for any reason, change the order of this, maybe I wanted NA honor roll status and high honor roll the other way, we can change that in the pivot table. So we would look where honor roll status is, and we'll see order is ascending, meaning from A to Z. We could change this to descending, and you'll notice both the pivot table and the chart will update their order. In this case, we get a little bit lucky because it's alphabetical in the way that makes sense, but we can change those there. If you're trying to really customize the order of things, it's not really easy to rearrange things in a pivot table. One thing I've seen and done is you can add into your data what we would call a helper column, essentially. And next to honor roll, you would put a 1, and next to NA, you'd put a 2, and high honor roll a 3, or something like that. And then you would add that into the pivot table so you could sort it by those numbers rather than the words themselves if that's not the order you're looking for. So in this chart here, the only thing I believe we're going to do is add some data labels. So click on the chart, 3 dots, edit. Now we have the chart editor here. Going to go to customize, and the series is your bars or your lines in your line charts, any of that. And if we scroll down, we'll see data labels. Check that off to get our data labels. These will automatically go in a certain place, size and color, depending on what you have. But what we're going to do is change the font size to about 18 and even bold them possibly just to make them stand out since it's a very simple chart. If we did that for a chart like this up here, while we're doing it, I'll just model why we maybe wouldn't want to do it here. Again, series, data labels. Doesn't look horrible, but again, it's a lot of data in your face. That may be overwhelming for some. It may not be for others. You'll see these, some of these 50s, they can't fit in the bar, especially because we shrunk the axis, but so they'll float on top. The 100 is up here a little bit. So depending on how you like your charts, you may want to have the data labels, you may not. So this chart is now done. If we go back to our list, we've created that pivot table, we added the data labels, increased the size, and now we're going to create one more for group and honor roll status. So if we go to the exemplar, we'll just take a look at what that looks like. So we're going to have groups as our rows, honor roll status as our column headers, and then we're actually going to put some data here in the middle. So back to our dashboard, I'm going to copy this pivot table, paste it down here, open up the editor, and I'm going to clear this out just to start fresh. Groups, we're going to put on the rows. We'll see each unique group takes up a row. The columns are going to be the honor roll status. So again, we're taking each possible option of honor roll status, and each one is becoming a header for a column. So we're going to look at Group A high honor roll students, Group A honor roll students, and Group A students that are not on the honor roll. I'm also going to uncheck the show totals, you'll see the grand totals are going to go away on both the columns and the rows. We're not looking to have those. And I want to resort this here. I'd rather go from not any honor roll status to honor roll to high honor roll. So under honor roll, I'm going to sort by descending. Next, we're going to add some values in here. So we still don't have values, and we're going to use the after school column. And if you recall, this is either after school or NA, meaning not an after school program. So we're going to take that right here, I'm going to put it into values, and it's going to summarize by what's called count A. I believe that stands for count all. And what that's doing is it's counting all of the values in that column. So for group A, we got 3 that are NA, 7 that are honor roll, and 4 that are high honor roll. Now in its current state, this is counting everything in the after school column, whether it's an NA or after school. So we still have to make one additional change here. That's where the filters section comes in. We're going to take after school again and put it down into filters. You can put the same metric into more than one place. And if I open up after school, you'll see that we're looking at both after school and NA students. If I uncheck NA and click OK, focus your attention on the data here, you'll notice as soon as I hit OK, that data updates. So now this data is actually for only students in the after-school program, whereas before it was everybody because it was counting both the NAs and those that were after school. So this is an important filter change to make sure you're looking at the right data. And I actually believe in the exemplar we did not put that. So we're actually going to pop that in real quick. Take out students that are not in after school, and we'll update that. You'll notice the chart updated as well. So back to our dashboard here. I'm going to highlight the headers. I don't want this overarching header, just these here in row 59, the data below it, and I will insert a chart. So by default, it's noticing the data we have and it's suggesting appropriately a stacked bar chart. What this is doing is for group A, it's showing us we have 1 student that's not on the honor roll, 3 that are on honor roll, and 2 on high honor roll. And this stacking is the same for every single group. Group D, for example, only has 4 students on high honor roll, so we only see 1 color. This type of stacked bar chart is totally fine. You are seeing numbers, meaning number of students on the y-axis. We can change this to one other type, which I'd like to highlight, which is for stacking, instead of standard, we can change it to 100%. So again, focus on the y-axis here and the bars. You'll notice a change. Now every group goes to the top of the chart because each group in and of itself makes up 100%. 100% of group A, 100% of group B. And of group A, we're now seeing what percentage each of these categories makes up. So for example, the students that are not on high honor roll are maybe about 20% of that group. The honor roll students look like they're making up about 50%, and then you have your high honor roll that are remaining. So this is totally preference, whether you want to show it in the standard way or the 100%. I'm going to leave it in the 100% just for now. And we are able to check those off. We did this one as well. We did this. Okay. So the last thing we didn't do here was add some data labels. We'll do that quickly. We'll click on the 3 dots, edit chart, customize the series. And again, we can do this for certain parts. Say we only wanted the numbers on the high honor roll, for example, or you want to change the colors or anything like that. You can affect changes on a particular part of the series, but for data labels, we're going to do it to all of them. We're going to add data labels. I'm going to change the position to the center, and maybe we'll just bump those up a little bit, maybe bold them, and there we go. Next in our exemplar, we have these frequent views, which I think we'll get to later, and we have some slicers at the top, which we're going to get to as well. So we added those. Excellent. So now we're going to go to slicers. So a slicer is just a filter that we can use for our data, our dashboards, and our charts. So before that, let's maybe just format a little bit so we can include this space here. So for our dashboard, I'm going to right-click, insert a row above, and a neat trick that I didn't know for a long time is the redo button. Normally you think it's undoing what you undid, but my last action was insert a row. If I redo that, it will insert a row over and over again, because that's the last action that I did. So it's a really helpful feature. Sometimes people don't know exactly what it does. For example, if I colored this cell bright yellow, if I redo that, it's redoing that highlight of yellow. If I added, if I changed the formatting, if I changed the font, I can redo that action over and over. So I believe the first 3 columns here we're going to merge together, and we also only need to go to just a little bit off to the side here. So I'm going to maybe stop this at column O. So I'm going to click on column P, and all the way at the end I'm going to hold the Shift key, highlight everything in between, and I'm going to delete those columns just so it doesn't go over forever. I'm going to, probably just easier to copy these honestly, just for time's sake, paste those in. But we just added text, change the colors, background. Feel free to update that. But again, I'm just going to do it to save some time. So I left intentionally this space here so that we could fit our slicers in. To add a slicer, we're going to click on Data and add a slicer. It's going to try to predict the data range you want. It's not always perfect. The suggestions sometimes have the data. So for example, our data tab does go from row 1 to 120. I could click on that and it's good to go. If you're not sure and you want to do it and be sure you're accurate, I would delete the range that's in there. Click over to your data tab. It'll still stay here. And clicking on this box here will give you everything in that tab. And then you can click OK. So now we see this slicer here. We can move it into place. And you'll see it says select column first. So on the right, we get the slicer menu. This is saying what column do we want to filter on. In this case, it's going to be school. Notice the name changes to school. And a really important option here, apply to pivot tables. We want to make sure that's on because our dashboard is powered by pivot tables. Under customize, you can change the font, the title. If I wanted to select like choose a school or something along those lines, I'm going to leave that blank. I think the default of just school is perfectly fine. And I can X this out. So now this slicer, if I click on either the all button or the filter on the side, same thing, I now get a menu to select or deselect any schools. And I may need to zoom out just a hair to get this to show up the right way. There we go. So again, I can select or deselect any schools I want. I can choose select all, clear all, and pick anything I want. Once I'm done with all the schools, you have to make sure you click this green OK button. And notice the pivot tables and the charts, as soon as I click OK, are all updating. So you'll see 4 of 12 schools selected, and now we get just the 4, or is it 5? Oh, that's because I charted grand total here, that's why. So it's showing the 4 schools and the grand total in there. And that's it. If I select all, bring them all back, there we go. If I wanted to make another slicer, I could follow those same steps. I prefer to either click on the 3 dots and copy and paste, or just a simple keyboard shortcut of Control or Command C and Control or Command V. I now have a duplicate, and I can edit that slicer, change the column to say group, make sure I change this to group, and now we're all set with our second slicer. And I believe the third one we did was after school. So let's put that in there. Change the column to after school. And we're all set with our slicers. So now I can look at only a few schools here. I can say within those schools, I only want to look at groups A, B, C, and D. And I only want students that are in the after school program. And you'll notice all of those combinations are happening live. My charts are updating, my pivot tables are updating, all of the pivot tables and charts are updating. Maybe hard to notice this one, but this is different, I promise, if you go back and look. And this is very apparent because we're only showing groups A, B, C, and D, as opposed to groups all the way from A to H. If I want to reset these, click on them. I like to just hit select all, meaning I want to see all of this data, hit OK. And now it says all. Do the same thing for this one, and same thing for the last one. So that's how you create your pivot tables, your charts, your slicers to filter through your data and your charts. And the last thing to show before we actually get into these frequent views is going to be this little feature I keep alluding to if you haven't tried it already, which is, say you're showing this to somebody, you're presenting this data, or you're just reviewing it yourself. You may want to dig more deeply into this data. This is great, and you may say, hey, I'm noticing let's zoom this in a little bit. I'm noticing that the high honor roll students have great attendance, and the honor roll students have really good attendance too, but the students that didn't make honor roll don't have great attendance, and I'm not sure if it's maybe one influences the other, vice versa, or maybe they're not impacting each other at all. But if you'd like to see who those students are, in any pivot table, you can either double click or right click on a number that's a value. It has to be one of the values. And you can, again, right click and hit show details, or I prefer to just double click. And Google Sheets will create a new tab at the bottom. You'll see it says detail at the bottom. And this is now all of the data for just those students that you clicked on. So this is honor roll students that are NA, and again, it's going to just show all of their data, including their attendance. So this is all of those students. You'll notice just NA for honor roll. I can delete that and keep going. This is another good example, or maybe a better one. This is showing me the group A students that are on the honor roll, and we may have taken off that filter, so let's make sure it's just after school students. So this is after school students in group A that are honor roll. And if I double click, you'll see after school students, honor roll, group A, showing me exactly who those students are that meet all of those criteria. And I can now look more deeply. I can look over all of the accompanying data comes. I can check out their ELA scores, their math scores, attendance rates. I can see everything right from here. So really great feature. It's not always made obvious to people. I like to add a little note just so people don't forget. Double click on any cell, or again, right click and show details, and you get to see exactly that group of students. It does create a new tab each time, which you need and is helpful, but I like to, when I'm done with them, just delete them so they don't become overwhelming. So if we run back to the task list, we added some slicers, we checked on the double click for pivot table data. The last thing we are going to see here is the filter views and links to those filter views. So in the exemplar dashboard, these charts are great. Sometimes when we're looking at these data dashboards, or just data spreadsheets in general, there's typical data you'd like to look at or somebody else may need to look at. So here are some examples. Maybe you always need to look at, maybe you're responsible for groups B, F, and H, and you want to see the students that are on high honor roll. The way this works is we can click on it and click the little link below, and it brings us back to the data tab, and we now have a preset filtered view of groups B, F, and H that are on the high honor roll. This all works based on a feature that's called a filter view, and we're going to show you how that's set up right now. So I'm going to go to the exemplar. I'm going to actually copy just this formatting again, just to save a little bit of time here. So let's paste that maybe right over here, and I'm going to intentionally get rid of these links so we can rebuild them. But again, just the shell of this will be here. Say I want grade 5 honor roll students. If I always want to look back at that, I can go to the data tab, and I can be anywhere in the spreadsheet. I like to just select everything to be safe, and I'm going to go to data and create a filter view. You'll see it says temporary filter. We're going to click on save, and I'm going to title this grade 5 honor roll. Click on save, it already exists. So let's maybe do grade 5 high honor roll. So now that filter view is saved, I can see the name up here. I can click to edit. I see the range that this filter view is affecting. It should be all of your data if you have a situation similar. And now what's going to happen is when you filter this, you're going to basically set up the filter. So for grade, I want nothing except grade 5. And I wanted high honor roll, so I'm going to get rid of these two. You're basically changing the filters as you normally would, but the difference here is you'll notice these different green borders. This is only affecting this view. So if I click on this exit, it brings me back to the data. If I'm collaborating on this Google Sheet, everybody can see this view here. When I go into a filter view, only if I explicitly choose to look at that filter view am I seeing that. So filter views, I can go to change view and go back to that high honor roll. This can be really helpful if a number of people are looking at the same spreadsheet and everyone needs to look at a different filter or a different view. Maybe it's administrators and they're all responsible for different schools. Maybe it's homeroom teachers and they're responsible for different kids. Each person can look at a filter view and see their own data and not be affecting what everyone else sees who's looking in the same spreadsheet at the same time. So this is all well and good. We can click data, change view, and we can get to them here. But what I like to do, it's just a little bit of an add-on and a usability thing, is if you look up in the URL of the Google spreadsheet, you'll see this extra piece gets added on when you open up a filter view. So if I get rid of it, you'll see that that goes away. The GID that changes each tab that you look at. When I open up a filter view, again, we'll do that 5th grade high honor roll. You'll notice this extra component. It's an ampersand and then FVID, stands for filter view ID, and then equals, and this is the number that Google gave it. When you take this entire URL and you copy this to your computer, this can now be sent in an email. This can be put in a document. This can be put anywhere. And when you navigate to that particular link, it's going to bring you not only to this spreadsheet, not only to this tab, but to this filter view. So we leverage that by going this is now going to be high honor roll, I can click on the link button, or I can hit Control or Command K, right click, insert link, any of those options work, and I'm going to paste and hit apply. So now, even if this is out of the filter view, as soon as I click here, it's saying I want to go directly there. It's going to bring me to the spreadsheet, to the tab, and to the filter view. It's a quick, easy way to get there. So we're going to do that just one more time. I'm not going to do all 5 of these. ELA average below 65. And maybe I'll change this now to math, since I did that one already and it's going to yell at me. So I'm going to copy this name just to make it easier. I'm going to get out of this filter view, or another neat trick is you can hit Options and you can duplicate the view if you want something similar. Now you'll see it says copy of grade 5. I can just change the name to math average below 65, and that's helpful because the range stays the same. So I basically just made a copy of the filter view, and now I'm just going to swap these out because it's not too difficult. So I'm going to reset those filters, and I want the math average below 65. So let's scroll over to math average, and I can uncheck these and keep going. The problem with that, number one, it could take a long time. And number two, if your data updates, if you put a new value, it's going to automatically get included until you have to uncheck it again. So a better way here is, rather than filter by values, we're going to actually filter by condition. So we're going to open this up, and we're going to say if the value is less than 65. Hit OK. And automatically, it's going to scan everything, and it's going to only filter for everything lower than 65. I can even click on this column and sort it low to high or high to low, and now you'll see all the data, everything moves, so all the relevant data in the column moves, and now this can stay sorted from high to low. If I take this entire link, copy it, and I'm going to click on the link button, paste it in. Now, if I click on, again, let's get rid of this filter view just to see it working. If I click on dashboard, math average below 65, and click, brings us right to that filter view, math average below 65, and it also preserves the sorting as well as the filtering on that column. I'm going to X that out, jump to the task list, and that is our last one. So I hope you found this video very helpful. We've now reached the end of this dashboard. I can pop that in there just for aesthetics. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe and follow for more content. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.